Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Boon, who's the founder of Tappollo. Boon, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Hey, you're welcome. So I know that you focus on mobile apps and working with startups. And so I'm excited to learn from you. So give us a little bit of your background and your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure. My background is I got a degree in computer engineering. And when I first started out, I was a game programmer. I was doing games for a company called Vivendi Universal. And I later on worked as a game programmer for Microsoft and also went to do some work in e-commerce with Amazon as well. After that, I did a lot of actual online games for different companies like Hasbro, Nintendo. Those are usually through gaming studios. So Hasbro, Nintendo, Nickelodeon, and Disney. And with those knowledge, I ended up also working with a lot of interactive and advertising agencies. Again, doing things for different brands. So I gained a lot of consumer experience throughout the first few years of me being in the industry. And then I started launching, building apps on my own, and started my company and started to build a team around that. So because I initially in the first few years, I started building a lot of apps on my own and gained a lot of experience. I have my app featured by Apple and in the Apple commercial and all of that. And I started using the experience and started helping companies and startup build their own apps as well. So that's sort of how I got started and where I ended up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing through all of that is you've created some great networking relationships, which then led to you being able to work with some top companies like iHeartMedia and Discovery Channel. So before we jump into like app development and what founders and early stage companies need to be thinking about, I would like to ask you, what would you recommend someone that is starting off in their career to keep in mind with networking and relationship building? Because hearing the work you did with some of those companies, just because you worked on a team that worked for some of those does not necessarily mean when you launch a company, you can get big clients. So somehow you were developing wonderful relationships and that has paid off for you.
Yeah, I think the relationship and the networking should be two of the most important things that school should have taught us, right?
Yes.
I never learned that. It was through really just, working and building meaningful relationships with people that I started realizing how important it was and it is. And but it is one of the most key things because when we build things for companies, like before you get to do that, you have to do sales. You have to sell yourself. You have to sell your service. You have to, and all of that. If there's a relationship already established, things can happen much quicker. So the relationship is definitely one of the key thing when we work on things like networking as well. Because when people come to you through word of mouth marketing, through referral, things get closed so much quicker. So things happen so much quicker. So yeah, definitely. I think the networking and the relationship part. I mean, relationship means it's a long-term kind of thing. It's not a transaction. Transaction happens, like very immediately. Like you just get what you want and you walk away from it. But yes. I think relationship is something you need to nurture, and you need to also be doing the right thing to make sure you don't you earn the trust, because you could be doing a lot of right things you have to do a lot of right things in order to build a relationship, but you probably only have to do one or two wrong things to break that relationship. So building a relationship is actually a very hard thing to do.
Yes.
And so if you put a lot of attention to that and really try to do the right thing, it will serve you well. So you're right. Those are the really, really important things when it comes to, doing things in anyone's career. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. So do you specifically now work with founders and startups, or do you work
Yeah.
with many different types of clients?
Yeah. Good question. So these days it's primarily with startups, just because of a couple different key reasons why. One is we don't really work off of the agency model anymore. In the initial years, we do, but later on we switch over to working with startups. Couple of different reasons why that's the case. With startups, we cannot really reuse the agency model because it's kind of broken. It doesn't really work with startups. So, and the reason being, agency usually work on a cash only model, and cash only model, in my opinion, it doesn't really work for startup because startup founders actually require that you watch their back. With a cash only model, you tend to want to maximize the cash outcome, meaning that you want the project to go on for as long as possible.
Yeah.
So that goes against a startup type of mentality. Startup, you need to build as little as you can, get it out as soon as possible. All those things don't really work well with the cash only model. So when we do things with startup founders, we do it on a cash equity basis. So we are betting on the long-term success, on the equity outcome, not on the cash outcome. So because we share success, right? If they succeed, then we succeed. If they fail, we would at least have to suffer from their failure as well. So the decisions that we make better be correct. But with cash only outcome, with an agency model, they don't really suffer any of that. They could recommend you the wrong technology. They could be getting the wrong thing done, or they could do the thing they could be doing a bad job, but they don't really suffer any of the consequence from that. So so in my opinion, cash only model doesn't actually work. And I work with many startup founders that come to me after they got burned by sort of the cash only model. So, I mean, obviously there are other reasons why it doesn't work, but just the alignment just is not there when you work with someone on a cash only model. So, so with startup founders, the whole cash equity model makes a lot of sense. And for me, it's also a lot of satisfaction to work with startups that way as well. You get to pick the right project and all of that. Yeah.
Well, also it makes me think of you also, you're not just saying, please hire us. You are evaluating the potential client because your fee that you're charging is a certain dollar amount, but you're taking some equity in the company, which means the upfront fee is lower. So that means that you have to realize that this company could go somewhere, and then you'll earn, participate in the growth. So if you get someone that comes to you and says, work with us, you need to evaluate them to see if you even want to work with them. So what does that look like?
Exactly. You're so right about that. That's why the whole cash equity model is really, really useful for startup founder, because it changes the dynamic from both sides, right? So when we look at a project, we have to make sure that it has so when you look at a project, if a project comes to you on a cash only basis, you're going to take it on, because as long as it gives you cash, you're going to take it. Because the equity is involved, we not only do we have to look at the idea itself, we have to look at the founder themselves as well. If we don't think the founders are going to be able to lead the company through tough times, or the founder doesn't have the right attribute to make this successful, we're not going to take it on. So yeah, you're right about that. We really evaluate things from many different levels, and so even for an idea, before we even get to it, we spend a lot of time to try to help them hone the business model and all of that, all those things that won't take place in a traditional sort of agency model. Those things we have to do, when we work in this manner.
Yeah, because the traditional agency model might have an element of someone comes to you, they say, here's what we want you to build us, and you build it, hand it back to them, and they pay your fee. and there's no
It's-
participation in the success. Whereas in your model, you are partnering with them and you want to see them succeed. And there's times, I'm sure, that you will not take on a project because of you don't see that it has the potential you're looking for. Not that it's a bad idea, but maybe you don't see that it fits in your parameters. So does that mean that you all look in work in specific industries, or what are some of the parameters that you look for to work with clients?
Yeah, Mike, you have a lot of good questions there. So, we don't really look for the industries themselves. Don't really dictate the success of a project. So in that sense, we don't really limit that. We actually work with founders from many different industries. The parameters that really comes down to deciding how successful a product is going to be is the founder. How good are they? How well funded are they? So I mean, they don't have to be very well funded, but at least the founder, we have to see if the founder is very open to our suggestions when it comes to what to build and how much to build and all of that. The other thing that's super important is also, are they just trying to build a better mousetrap, or are they applying the proper sort of blue ocean strategy on the idea? Meaning that when they launch the app, how much competition are they going to be facing? If they are able to carve things out in such a way where they're going to be not going to be, they're going to be sort of like the only thing in the space, or there's not a whole lot of competition going on, then that would be a good thing to work on as well. If they don't have to necessarily to come to us with that set. We will sometimes use the blue ocean strategy to help them carve things out that way as well. So
and
yeah,
you probably see potential in companies that come to you, and you might be able to bring some ways to expand what they're even considering, and then that really makes the collaboration work well.
Yes, we do, and not only that, because we work mainly with startups, and we want all of them to succeed. We actually facilitate collaboration between them as well. So frequently we make intros between the startups to have them talk and have them learn from each other and have them collaborate. Because if by connecting the dots, I can make sure that I increase the chance of them succeeding.
Now, when you say startup, I know a lot of people might feel like, a startup is someone that works out of their home and they have this idea and now they're a startup. But do you tend to work with funded startups that have some rounds of funding behind them?
Not necessarily. It could be an individual. They're still working on a full-time job. They come to us with an idea that they want to pursue. They have to have some money, obviously. They have to have money in their bank, probably personal savings. It could be like that. So it could be well-funded, it could be somewhat funded, or it can be totally personally funded. All the spectrum, we work with those, yeah.
What is an example of someone you've worked with that came to you with a very unique idea? Because I love the blue ocean, concept, because red ocean is all the competition. Blue ocean is no one is competing. So these days it's ideas and apps and business concepts are so, they fast and furious. So what is an idea? What is one that someone's come to you and it's been really unique and then it's paid off really well?
Okay. Yeah. So one of them is, if you imagine an app, friendship and dating app, there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
But this one founder came to us, and his app is friendship and dating app, but for the autistic people, for the autism community.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So you can see right away that we're trying to serve a group of people that have problem with social interaction. So that one is super unique. Every time when I mention that idea to people, it always comes back with a wow.
Yeah.
People, I don't even have to go far with that. Just mentioning what the app does can generate a lot of experience reaction. Yeah.
And let's use that as a talking point real quick, because I think a lot of people that would want to launch a business, any business, but especially one that needs an app, it cannot be broad. that you're going to succeed more when you go really narrow and pick that target audience very precisely. Well, perfect example there, dating apps. I'm sure we can Google that and find unbelievable amounts of dating apps out there and platforms. But when you narrow it down to the autistic community, now that becomes something that, number one, is a wonderful social cause that would serve that group of people very well. But also it really narrows it down to really separate yourself from the competition. So do you work with people, when you work with people, do you ever find that they're a little bit too broad and then you have to coach them on how to narrow it down? Maybe even you use that one as an example, but sometimes where people think, oh no, this is what I want to build. And then you present to them these ideas of how narrow and tightly can we go and still be very successful.
Yeah, I do. And the narrowing down part is super important, because when you have limited cash, you want to make sure that you're serving the right people. It's easier when it comes to customer acquisition. The experience is also better because it's highly optimized for a certain niche or certain group of people. It doesn't have to always be that approach, like that angle, but for sure the scope has to be very sort of targeted and very focused. So because it has so many implications in terms of the overall experience and the cost and the time, and again, whether you will end up being sort of the only one in the market because it's so it's so sort of focused. So for sure.
And you don't want to be so narrow that you become like a unicorn. And I mean, you want to be a unicorn because you want to be, make $1 billion really fast, but you don't want to be so odd that people don't relate to you. So you want to be narrow and you want to be unique, but not so unique that people just pass right by and say, that's just strange, So can you think of what's an idea where you kind of narrowed it down and then you had to say, okay, that's a little too narrow. So now let's go a little bit tight, a little bit wider. And now that's dialed in really well. Can you think of an example that way?
Many things I think of one. So there's one that we worked on. Well, that one is actually when the founder came to us, the idea was already pretty good. So there's not much that we need to sort of help them shape. But that one, it's really interesting because the idea when it came to us, it's actually kind of like it's actually like almost like an NFT type of an idea. Mm-hmm. So the idea is really to use blockchain to tie that with ticketing. And then, so ticketing is pretty general. You're serving tickets to anybody. But then in this case, the ticketing is using blockchain and smart contract to make sure that artists, when they are sort of running, when they're issuing the tickets for the events, that so essentially it's dealing with the whole scalping issue. Okay. And the secondary market, right? When you sell the tickets in the secondary market, a lot of times the profit that goes into the scalpers, they don't end up going. They end up going just to the scalpers and not to the artists. So this particular platform uses smart contract and blockchain to make sure that the artist can actually direct either proportion of the fund, the profit in the secondary market back to them.
Okay.
So in that sense, it's still ticketing, it's still broad, but it's really controlling the flow to make sure that the right behavior, the fair thing is happening.
And because when an NFT is sold, then that immediately gives benefit back to the original source. And then whereas if a paper ticket or an electronic ticket traditionally is sold, it could be resold, and the actual artist, kind of loses out along the way. So that's a really unique application as well.
Very unique. And at that time when that was launched, NFT wasn't a big thing yet.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't even done in an NFT way. And NFTs come up, and it became very popular, and the company became big because of that. But yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Well, I would think that when people are thinking of creating an app, they want someone that not only knows how to do the technology side of it and bring it to life, but also someone that can partner along with them and say, here's what we've seen along the way, and here's some advice. And I think that's what you guys are bringing to the market, is both sides of that equation. And I really like how you partner with people. So I would like to just ask, what's the best way someone that is listening to this could say, you know what, something about that conversation really sparked my interest, and we'd like to learn more about what Tappollo does. What's the best way they can reach out and learn more and connect with you guys?
Yeah, they can go to the website, tappollo.com, or they can email me at Boon, Boon, at tappollo.com. And just give me an outline of the idea, and I'll take a look at it and, ask some questions and take it from there.
Excellent. Well, Boon, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure talking with you, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.